Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I am your host, Eric McMahon, fresh off the heels of another exciting UFC pay-per-view from London, England. The man to help me break it all down, because there's a lot to talk about, and to break down the travel woes that he had over this weekend. Let me introduce you all to my man, John Morgan. What's up, pal?
Oh, man, I didn't know if we were going to get into it or not, but I'm just happy to be home right now, if I'm being honest with you, man. A great opportunity, man. I was out in Moncton, Canada this past weekend, got to be on the mic for Fight League Atlantic. I love calling fights. As you know, Eric, I love calling fights. We had some phenomenal ones, but Air Canada is not my friend. I'm just saying they did not do me well. I'm not here to bash on anybody. I understand everybody's just doing their job, and listen, I understand people got to make sure airplanes are safe and all that, but I'm telling you, every flight I had was either canceled or delayed, both there and coming back. It made for a little bit of a nightmare, but it was a fun weekend, and it was a great UFC event. And it's a new week. We start again.
Such is the trials and tribulation of life on the road. And with the, listen, when you get your name on the marquee like Cageside with John Morgan, some bad, listen, it's all good in the Morgan household. We got to bring you back down just a little bit. And that's Air Canada brought you back down just a smidge.
That's right. They brought me back down a little peg. If I was feeling a little too important about myself, they reminded me, sir, you were just an average person that is going to have to deal with some issues from time to time. So, yeah, it was a headache, man. Like I said, I always feel bad because on the one hand, you're complaining, right? But it's like, I do want this airplane to be safe. Like, I don't want you guys to take off if there's something wrong with this, because I like to get to my destination safely. But, you just kind of count on that stuff. It's reliable sometimes, and it makes for a little bit of a headache. But luckily, there was a hell of a UFC pay-per-view that kind of kept me entertained, and man, just a fun event over in London.
Well, without further ado, let's just get into it. Oh, and disclaimer, on his next trip, because I heard he's going to Colombia this week, if he has more travel issues, you can read about it on his Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. That's where I heard about it. So anyways, moving forward, looking back to the UFC 286, recapping it right now, that was in London, England, headlined by let's put the champion first, Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards defends and defeats Kamaru Usman by majority decision. Before we get into it, good decision?
I thought so. I did. I really did. As far as the fight itself, a lot to talk about, and not necessarily a classic, but I thought a lot of tension in there and a lot of strategy, and I enjoyed watching it. And going back and scoring, I will say this. I do believe the draw score that was thrown out there is acceptable. Given the point deduction, I do believe the draw is acceptable. However, I did not have it a draw. I completely understand why it would be a draw. I had it 4 rounds to 1, minus the deduction, and I gave it to Leon Edwards. So to me, either a Leon Edwards victory or a draw, both are very acceptable scores.
We talked a lot of scenarios last week about how this fight can go based off of what has happened in the past, based off of Kamaru Usman reigning supreme for so long in that division. Is he going to get back to that form, which he was in the last fight, other than one Hail Mary head kick around the world? Was that knockout going to mess with him mentally and or physically? Was Leon Edwards going to be riding this supreme confidence? We talked about all these scenarios, and all but one came true. I did not see the ultimate confident, the Kamaru Usman of, and I don't even want to say of old, because it's not of old. It was one fight ago. I didn't see that Kamaru Usman, and I want to preference this. As I said, we know he physically can take a shot. He took a lot of big shots. To me, he fought like Kamaru Usman usually does, but he didn't fight like Kamaru Usman really does, because he pressured and he pressured, but he always pressured just out of range, not in
Boy,
range.
I'm so glad you said this because you know what's funny is, I mean, obviously, as long as we've been in this game, the mental side of it is so huge, and I feel like sometimes as we talk about the mental side of it, I'm sure maybe some people listen to it and they go, I wish there was a little bit more X's and O's. I wish there was a little bit more physical talk. But man, I just don't think you can understand or understate, I should say, how important the mental side of the game is. And I think you're 100% right. I think Kamaru Usman was just a little bit less, just a little bit. It just wasn't, the swagger wasn't quite there. The confidence wasn't quite there. And understandably so, because he had to be wary of that head kick. And I think that changed a little bit of everything that he did. And the other thing, the one moment that stood out to me, and this is going to sound so wild, but the start of round 2, when Usman walks across the cage and he's ready to go and he starts, and Edwards doesn't even bother putting up his hands. And he just looks over Herb Dean. And he's like, hey, back him up to the center. He can't come all the way over here to my side. We're supposed to start in the center before the bell. That to me was just this mental confidence of like, hey, I'm the champ. This is my cage. You don't get to walk over here before the round has even started and put me on my back foot. You wait until the bell sounds and we go out and we meet in the middle. And that to me was such a huge statement. It's just a little tiny moment of showing where Leon Edwards' head was that, hey, no. I'm the champ. This is my cage. I'm going to dictate how things play out tonight. And I do think that mental edge was huge in this fight.
I'm going to piggyback on that really quick before I get into my analytical nerd talk, right? The one shot, right? When Kamaru Usman was over there. That saying, I did it without saying it, it's saying I did it before and I will or can do it again. Tread lightly. As they say, like Walter White, if you know what I'm capable, you best tread lightly. And to your point, when I saw that, man, like I'm almost getting goosebumps again. Listen, I'm not advocating like flashing guns and doing all this, that, and the other, but that to your point, that is such a big message. It wasn't like a big bravado. It was just like, you remember. I know you remember.
It was. I love that as well. It was a headshot dead. You know, I mean, that was the thing that he said after the victory in the last meeting. So just that little reminder of like, hey, if it wasn't in your head already, if you've been working all this time to say, forget about that, Kamaru. Don't worry about that. Don't think about that. Think about what you did good. Think about what you can do. No. Think about that. Think about what I'm capable of doing at any moment. I loved it. And man, it's just the comfort level that Leon had there, because you did want, I mean, would fighting on home soil be a bad thing? Would there be pressure of like, oh, here you are in front of 17,000 people at the O2 Arena, you need to deliver, et cetera, et cetera. The comfort level was just so there, you know, and I think it was Teddy Atlas who had been coming out in the week saying, you know, the moment you become champion, you become instantly 30% better. And, you know, it's kind of an old saying in boxing, but there is something to that. There's a difference between walking to the cage and saying, I know I can do this. I think I can do this. I believe I can do this. Everybody tells me I can do this. This is going to be my night. Versus walking to the cage and going, been here, done this, done it a million times. I'm all about this. There is a huge difference between the comfort level and the confidence level that comes with mindsets like that. And I thought Leon Edwards showed it on Saturday night.
I love the UFC miking the corners because there was a very telling sequence. Believe it was in between round 2 and round 3, going into 3, where Trevor Whitman recognized what we had been talking about. Was the mental game going to be there of getting knocked out? Because in 1 and 2, Kamaru caught him early in round 2, maybe, which led to a takedown of Edwards, but he was still losing every single exchange. Leon Edwards was winning every single exchange, not to any other fact, in my personal opinion, than Usman just being a little gun shy in every position and pressuring, but not committing to the pressure at all points. He was cutting him off really well, and he was willing to get pop shotted from the outside, rather than to enter the fire with his strikes to set up his takedowns, which we talked about was the key to victory for him. And in between round 2 and 3, Trevor Whitman says, next time, just run at him and put him against cage. Just run at him. He wasn't giving him any analytical. He wasn't giving him any strategic. He wasn't giving him any of that. Trevor Whitman realized that he needed to close that distance and close it fast because of the impending danger that does lie with Leon Edwards. and to realize, which I believe Trevor Whitman probably, if not one of the best coaches in the game, realized there is a mental block going on with Kamaru Usman right now. We need to bust right through it. So I'm going to tell him, hey, listen, when this happens, when we're at range, just run, just sprint into him.
Yep, and I thought it was sage advice because you're so right. You know what I think would have served Kamaru Usman a little bit better is like a Khamzat Chimaev type mindset, a Khabib Nurmagomedov mindset, where it's like, look, I'm not setting up in front of you and trying to feint my way into a takedown. Like I'm literally just coming at you, like you know what I'm gonna do. Just try and stop me. And it wasn't there. And when you're talking about this, think about this. I mean, you're talking about fractions of a second. It's not that Usman wasn't committing at all. It was just that he was a little bit wary of what might be coming back the other way, so it caused him to hesitate just a little bit. And just that little bit of hesitation allowed Leon Edwards to be a little bit more defensive, to be able to address everything correctly. By the way, I loved the wrist control that Edwards was showing. The defensive posturing was phenomenal. But I think you're right. A little bit of a tweak of a mindset and just get rid of that fraction of a second. Go forward 100%, sprint 100%. That's, to be honest with you, what I thought we were going to see from Usman in this fight, and we didn't see it a little bit. And it wasn't bad. It's not like I'm looking at Usman saying, well, that guy's just never going to compete again at a high level. No, it's just we were talking about chess between two of the best athletes at the highest level possible, and those little exchanges would have made all the difference.
Here's something else that I think really maybe played with Usman's mind and or his strategy. Not really. Well, his mind, I don't know if it did. It definitely played with his strategy, in my opinion. Usman does this great job of feinting all the time. He's feinting high. He's feinting low. He's just getting a reaction. And Leon Edwards was just stoic a lot of the times, almost standing directly in front of him. When he wasn't circling left or right, he was not biting on any feints at all. And I think that really played a factor because we said that Usman uses his strikes and yeah, he's a great polished striker. Yeah, he has like a couple knockouts on him. He's not known as this huge knockout fighter, but he's using these feints to draw people in so they don't see it, to react so they can't see the shot, which then is going to close the distance to get the takedown. And when Leon Edwards wasn't circling left or right and beating up that legs, which we will talk about, he wasn't biting on any feints, which really, in my opinion, threw off Kamaru Usman.
You're spot on. And by the way, beat up the legs, beat up the body as well. I mean, great work. But again, I think that just feeds back into that mental confidence, right? Where it's like, look, I'm not going to bite on your feints because once you do actually advance and attack me, I know exactly what I'm going to do. So I don't need to hesitate and anticipate what you're going to do. No, I'm just going to do exactly what I'm going to. The calmness, how collected he was the entire time, man. It just really was something to behold. And I just think it showed where Leon Edwards is at. I mean, mentally, he has matured to a point that he's not concerned about what you're going to do. So I don't need to anticipate what you're going to do because I'll react to what you do when you do it. That's what you're trying to get when somebody to bite on those feints, is because you're trying to set up something. You're trying to get a movement from them. You're trying to get a reaction from them so you can capitalize on that. And Leon wouldn't give him any of that. And it was a masterful performance, man. It really was. And, as I said off the top, was it the most exciting welterweight title fight we've seen of all time? No, it wasn't. But it was all these little tiny battles that were being won over each round that I thought made the thing so intriguing.
And like you said in the open, the tension in every single round and every single minute of that fight was awesome. Speaking of fights, Leon Edwards is now on a 12-fight win streak. His last loss coming against Kamaru Usman 3 fights ago, which, listen, he's the king of the welterweight division now, hands down. But one thing I was noticing, and because I want to talk about the body shots and the leg shots, is we don't see Kamaru Usman shoot from range very often. He's always bullies you up into the fence, drags you down from there. And I think the coaching done with Leon Edwards, by his coaching, they knew that. And so they're like, let's just start ripping to the body. He's not known for a guy who's going to catch, dump you, or drive through it. He's going to be known for a guy who's going to push you against the fence and then work from there. And if there is a chink in the armor, which I've never seen a chink in the armor from Usman, that to me, might be the chink in the armor that he has.
It's a great point. It really is. I think, and it's so hard to make it justice. We talked about, Usman being able to correct the dip off to the side, right? It's so difficult to change things when you've been doing something a certain way so long. And I think it might be difficult for him to change his entire approach to wrestling in an MMA fight. But you're 100% right about that. Had he been willing to shoot from range a little bit, maybe it'd have been a little bit more effective. And I thought Leon did such a great job of, Usman did get to that clinch position quite frequently. It wasn't like he wasn't able to get there. That's usually his strong point. But Leon countered by making sure that he maintained wrist control. And by doing that, usually what Usman likes to do is to, as you said, get into that clinch, create like some scrambles, create some movements, ankle pick you, drag you down, use wrist control to drag your arm down. Instead, Edwards was capitalizing the other way. So it was just, I think it was masterful coaching. And look, that goes back to their second meeting, right? When people used to say, oh, well, that was a lucky shot. And then you saw the training footage where his coaches and trainers were like, no, listen, you can anticipate this movement. He's going to do this, and you can counter with that left high kick. I think it was the same thing here. They knew exactly what they were going to be facing in terms of a wrestling approach, and they countered with it perfectly, and Leon didn't panic. He did everything he needed to do. He executed the game plan perfectly. It was a well-coached, a well-planned, and a well-executed fight. It's just, whether you're a Leon Edwards fan or not, you have to look at that and see it was a masterpiece from the beginning going into the cage to the time in it afterward. I mean, it was just all perfectly done. They knew exactly how to beat Usman, and they got it done.
In round 3, where that point deduction happened, I believe it was 3, right?
3, yep.
Okay. I was yelling at the TV, don't do it, Herb. Don't do it. But I knew he had to. I knew he had to take the point. Great job of refereeing, and thank goodness it didn't alter the fight. But Leon Edwards clearly grabbed the fence, which clearly held him, I'm not going to say up, but it clearly kept him balanced, right? And not only he did it about 5 seconds earlier than that too, but I was so scared in that moment that now I'm like, oh my goodness, if freaking Usman wins this round, after I just banked 1 and 2 for Leon Edwards, we're at a draw now. And, man, what we dodged. And I say we as fans, Leon Edwards dodged such a huge bullet there.
Yeah, it's funny. So I definitely thought the point deduction was warranted. And I agree. You hate to take a point in any situation if you don't have to, right? I mean, in a 3-round fight, it's even worse, right? Because it feels like you're almost guaranteeing a draw. In a 5-round fight, a little bit less impact, but still significant, especially in a title fight of this magnitude. But it did feel like a warranted point deduction because it wasn't, Leon did kind of say, but I barely grabbed it. Like, you did kind of grab it twice. I mean, it was like 2 different takedown attempts because he tried to move right and then he tried to move left, and you were holding on to that cage both times. So I had no problem with the point deduction. But the thing I took out of that situation as well, and I know I keep harping on this point, but I think it's worth mentioning, is the mental strength of Leon Edwards. Because that moment when you're working your tail off to do certain things, I scored it up to that point the same way you did. I had rounds 1 and 2 for Leon Edwards. And then we're getting to round 3, and I actually ended up giving that round to Usman plus the point deduction, so a 10-8. So at the end of 3 rounds, I did have this thing completely even. But I thought what was important to see is, again, the mental focus of Leon Edwards, because that could easily break a person. That could easily shift their confidence. That could easily get them worried where they're now, you say, come on, man. And look, there had been some other fouls up to that point. There had been discussion of a hand in a glove. There had been a low blow at that point. And I want to make it clear. I've seen some people saying, Leon's a dirty fighter. He's not a dirty fighter. Things happen in a cage fight. Get that out of the way. But when you have these interventions, and I think going into round 4, I think Herb even said, like, leave me out of this. Like, don't make me get involved in this. You don't want the referee involved. But I thought it just went again to show the strength of Leon Edwards. That, he had the point deduction, but he almost had this kind of blank stare on his face as he was dealing with it, and I thought that was a good blank stare where it's like, I'm not letting this take any of my emotion. I'm not letting this take any of my energy. I'm not letting this take any of my focus. I know the task at hand, and I'm going to stay on it. So I have no issues with the point deduction whatsoever. I don't think Leon's a dirty fighter, but I think it was phenomenal that he didn't allow that to break his rhythm and to break his focus.
And it gave Eric heart complications because I thought it was going to have a dramatic impact on the fight, which it did not. Another fight that had me like my heart just racing. Co-main event, Justin Gaethje, Rafael Fiziev. I'm going to read you a stat. All right. Well, actually, I had it written down. Justin Gaethje, 11 fights in the UFC, 11 fight night bonuses.
Come on.
If this guy was not a Roman Coliseum fighter, I don't know who is.
Justin Gaethje, I mean, one of the most exciting fighters in MMA history, period. I mean, this guy first came on my radar at World Series of Fighting, where he put on some phenomenal fights over there.
Luis Palomino's fights, oh my goodness.
If you have never seen Justin Gaethje versus Luis Palomino, both of them, go watch them. They're on YouTube. You can find them. They're some of the most exciting fights you'll ever see. And this dude, he just brings it every single time. And you knew this fight. I mean, when fights get announced and you just go, well, that's going to be fight of the night, and then it ends up being fight of the night, I mean, you just knew this was going to be exciting. It's because, I mean, both these guys are exciting fighters, but Justin Gaethje doesn't know how not to be exciting. I mean, this dude really tune in every single time, man. He is not just right now, literally one of the most exciting fighters in the history of mixed martial arts.
Had to dig deep in this one. Now, he had to fend off a furious pace on him. Rafael Fiziev was so relentless in this fight that from fan perspective, this fight really isn't going to alter him, maybe in title implications, but I think from a drawing power status, it's not going to hurt him all that much.
No, not at all. Not at all. This was super entertaining. Fiziev is, on that track of being one of the most exciting guys in the UFC. I mean, Gaethje's been laying it out there for years, but if Fiziev can continue to turn in performances like that, he is a hardcore fan favorite. I don't know if the casual fan knows his name yet. Hopefully this was the type of performance, even in loss. I mean, there's no way you watch that fight and the next time Rafael Fiziev gets announced for a fight, you don't want to tune in. I mean, nobody's going like, that guy's done. No, I want to watch that guy. I don't care whoever he fights next. Guess what? I'm in. Because it was that exciting. It's a loss in the record books, but in terms of drawing power, in terms of fan interest, I think it's a win for Fiziev.
I have never listen, I have a soft spot in my heart for Justin Gaethje. He's an Arizona boy, just like I am. He's from Safford, Arizona. Now trains out of Colorado with Trevor Whitman and one of Trevor Whitman's few clients that he has. But like you, I've been following Justin Gaethje for a long, long time. Always an exciting fighter. Under Trevor Whitman now, he's a very calculated, exciting fighter. Whereas the Justin Gaethje of the past was a reckless, throwing everything at the wall. Let's see if you can handle the freight train coming at you that does not get tired. And that cardio won out, in my opinion, in this fight. But prior to that, I have never seen Justin Gaethje on his back foot as much as I did in this fight.
Well, I think you said it. I mean, the tactical awareness. Justin Gaethje from the beginning has said, look, my job is to go out there and create car crashes. Like, that's what I do. I just create impact, and I'm going to see if your will to last is as good as mine. I'm not saying that I'm tactically better than you, but I'm just going to be tougher than you, and I'm going to make it exciting. And he's always said, look, I want to be the most exciting fighter in the UFC, and he is. But you're right. Sometimes it pays to add in a little bit of tactics as well. Coming into this fight, I'll be honest with you, I picked Fiziev. I thought, look, and I did preface it by saying, look, don't ever count Justin Gaethje out of a fight, period, because you can't. His toughness, his durability, his cardio. I mean, that dude can compete with anybody. But I thought Fiziev was just going to be a little bit too technically sound. And I think, when you're talking about high levels and you're a little bit more technically sound, you're going to be better. But Gaethje added in a little bit of technical soundness as well. It turns out he is listening to his coaches. It turns out he can think, and that just makes him even more dangerous. So now you've got a guy that is this violent, that is this incredible, that is this durable, And now, wait a minute. He's in there thinking a little bit too. Dangerous.
He is the type of guy that changes people's careers when they fight. I mean, I think another guy on that exciting all-time exciting fighters, Ferguson, changed his career. That fight changed his career with Justin Gaethje. And I hope this doesn't happen with Rafael Fiziev, but he took some massive shots. He got busted up so bad in this fight and never stopped coming forward, even in that third round. And the adjustment, Daniel Cormier chronicalized it really good on the broadcast. But that jab to uppercut, which seemed to land every single time, and the thudding nature of both of those shots. Justin Gaethje doesn't flick a jab. He pounds a jab through your face, only in this fight to then follow it up with the most brutal uppercuts that disfigured Rafael Fiziev.
Boy, now you're making me sad because I hadn't thought about that. I'm still basking in the glory of the fight, but you're so right. There's a stat out there, and I wish I had in front of me about like what opponents' records are after they fight Justin Gaethje, and it's not good. You know what I mean? They typically they find a little fall off after that. As you said, they change careers, and I hadn't thought about it that way, and I'm going to say this situation. I hope you're not right because I believe Fiziev is such a gifted track. I will say, luckily Fiziev has a long like Muay Thai track record as well. I mean, he's been in a lot of fights over the years. But you're right. Boy, I thought, there was that picture of Rafael Fiziev just blood soaked and busted up, and he tweeted out like it was worth it just to have this photo. I mean, he really went through an absolute battle, an absolute war. I hadn't thought about it that way, so now you're kind of making me sad a little bit, Eric, because I hope that Fiziev's not going to step down a level. But you're right.
I don't think he was. He's young enough in that career that I don't think it's going to have that lasting impact. It was just saying it was more of a testament to just how freaking relentless Justin Gaethje is, and then to compound that with how just mentally tough Rafael Fiziev was to say, I don't care. I'm still going forward, which he did the entire time.
It was fantastic. They were the perfect matchups in the cage. I mean, when this thing was put together on paper, I mean, literally, when this thing was first announced, every MMA fan was just rubbing their hands together going, oh, that's going to be phenomenal. And it was phenomenal. And all props to Justin Gaethje because, again, as I said off the top, I thought Fiziev was going to win this fight, but I did say don't ever count Justin Gaethje out of a fight, and I think he showed exactly why, man. Justin Gaethje, boy, I mean, we talk sometimes about how like people throw out legend and people throw out these names, but I'm thinking Justin Gaethje, UFC Hall of Famer, because I think he's a Hall. Dude, this to me
11 fights, 11 fight night bonuses. Yeah.
Dude, I think so. Like whether he ever gets a title or not, like I think that's a dude that belongs in the Hall of Fame at some point. I mean, this is if you were ever to say like, I don't know about MMA. I don't really like it too much, man. I don't really I've never really seen a fight. I feel like they grapple too much. I don't really like that. Just hey, here. I got you a DVD. I want you to do people even have DVDs anymore? I got you a digital file. I emailed you again. Watch these fights. I mean, if you watch Justin Gaethje fight, I just don't know how you couldn't watch that and be like, I'm a fan, dude. I want to see more of this stuff.
Clay Guida and Diego Sanchez are in the Hall of Fame for their fight. If that's the benchmark, which was a phenomenal fight, a Hall of Fame worthy fight, if that's the benchmark, I can name four Justin Gaethje fights that will be in the UFC.
All right, so that's, dude, as you started to mention this, because you're absolutely right. So that's kind of the weird part about the Hall of Fame, right? There are fights that are in the Hall of Fame. So you could technically be in the Hall of Fame just for one night, not your entire career. So I think there's no way that he doesn't make it in for a fight. I think he should just make it in on his own merits, to be honest with you. But there's no way he doesn't make it in fights. But as you were starting to mention that, you know what scared me is I was like, which one would you pick? Because you're right. There's so many of his fights.
Listen, let's go back to his UFC debut against Michael Johnson. I will call that a Hall of Fame worthy fight.
Yep, I agree.
Justin Poirier 2 and 1, if you want to say it. That number 1 was amazing. Michael Chandler. That was a and then if those weren't good enough for you, I'll give you Rafael Fiziev.
Unbelievable. Yeah, as I'm thinking about it now, like that might be cool. Maybe he'll be the first guy to have multiple fights in the Hall of Fame, right? I mean, that which is an insane accomplishment. If you think about there's a fight for anybody that doesn't know, there's a fight wing of the Hall of Fame, right? There's the pioneers, there's the modern era, there's contributors, and then there's the fight wing where it's like, hey, we're putting these guys in for this one single night. This one fight was so good that it's one of the greatest fights of all time in UFC history that we're putting it in the Hall of Fame. Justin Gaethje could literally have multiple entries into that wing of the Hall of Fame. That would be a pretty spectacular accomplishment in itself.
And we just spoke it into existence. It's going to happen. Like I said, if Diego Sanchez, Clay Guida is the benchmark, right? Let's call that the benchmark. Then I think Justin Gaethje definitely deserves a minimum of 2, probably 3 that I can like. I just named 4.
I know, bro. That run of Johnson, Alvarez, Poirier to start his career. That was the start of his UFC career. I mean, that's unbelievable, man.
That
truly
fight
one of
night,
the
the night before the UFC pay-per-view International Fight Week, that where the debut of Justin Gaethje versus Michael Johnson, and he is like doing the stanky leg all over the cage because Michael Johnson hurt him so bad in that fight. And his relentlessness and his pressure and his attacking of the legs. And then to top it all off, he finishes Michael Johnson, does his patented, backflip off the cage. And I just said, I knew this guy was bad. Like, I was a little worried he couldn't do it against this UFC competition. Boy, was I wrong.
I'm taking myself back to that moment, man. I remember sitting there, Cageside, and you're so right, because I was basically a fan of his World Series of Fighting work. I'm like, dude, it was one of those ones where you're like, bro, if you're not a hardcore, you haven't been watching this guy. Trust me, he's going to entertain. And you're telling people, hey, I don't watch World Series of Fighting. I haven't seen this guy. And you're like, oh, just wait. But you don't know. And then he goes in there and does that. And it's like, see, I told you, man, this dude is one of the best. And you know what? That would be a really great one to be in the Hall of Fame as well, because that would get Michael Johnson into the Hall of Fame, which Michael Johnson is not going to get into the Hall of Fame on his accomplishments alone. But you look at how long he's been in there and how many fun fights and how long he's been around. That would be a cool honor for him as well. So knowing, as we've already spoken to existence, that there's going to be multiple Justin Gaethje fights in the Hall of Fame, I hope that's the first one, that they do it chronologically and add him in after that, because I'd love to see Michael Johnson get to share in that honor, because that was a phenomenal night, man. That was a phenomenal fight.
Staying with UFC 286, little bit of surprise going on. Somebody made a weigh-in as a backup fighter, to which Dana White says, it wasn't no damn surprise. Nobody even asked. I wasn't hiding anything. But the man we have talked about, what's he doing, what's he not doing, and he's been radio silent. Colby Chaos Covington came out in the fashion that he does. He made weight to be the in-case backup fighter, and then he just does his thing. He starts calling out people. He starts talking mad-ish. And you know what? He talked himself straight into a title shot.
This is so hard for me, Eric, because anytime I talk about Colby Covington, I feel like I have to say, this isn't personal. This has nothing to do with me. Because obviously we've had a little bit of history between each other. But I really mean that. I am just sitting in here discussing things from a very non-biased perspective, not because I have anything against Colby Covington. I love what Colby does. I love that he comes in and injects some chaos into the situation, right? And just talks some crazy stuff. But I will say, I hope that the decision changes. I'll be honest with you. And I mean this is no disrespect, not to Colby Covington. It's funny because he got mad at me because he said I said he didn't deserve a title shot last time. I never said that. Now I'm going to say it. I don't think Colby Covington deserves a title shot right now. I'm not saying that he isn't worthy of being there, not to say that he isn't capable of fighting anybody, not to say that, he isn't deserving of being in all that discussion, but it just seems like right now at this point in the welterweight division, there's other matchups that seem to make more sense. Like, for instance, we've got UFC 287 in Miami, right? That's happening in a couple of weeks. Now you've got Jorge Masvidal versus Gilbert Burns. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks. I'll just be honest with you. Tough matchup for Jorge Masvidal. I kind of like Gilbert Burns stylistically in the matchup. But if Jorge Masvidal finds a way to win, which he certainly can, the dude has been doing it since the backyard days with Kimbo Slice. If he finds a way to win, how do you not make that fight? The three-piece in the soda, the history with Leon Edwards, you got to make that fight. So that, to me, is a more compelling storyline than Colby Covington being in there. Also, by the way, if we're talking about terms of just merit, How about Bilal Muhammad and where he stands at this point and the win streak that he has? So those to me are both two more competitive. Now, if Gilbert Burns wins, okay, maybe you don't need to go Gilbert Burns right away. But again, you still got that Bilal Muhammad problem out there. So I don't know. Colby is definitely in the mix. There's no question about it. But he just hasn't been active. He's been out for a while. I'd love to see him fight one more. I'm glad that he came in here. He made things more exciting. It definitely, I mean, you look at like the views and the numbers that he was pulling. I mean, people are definitely excited and talking about him. But I just kind of, it just seems like there's other options right now that they don't have to go to that fight at this moment.
I'm going to agree and disagree. Right? Now, listen, I am Team John Morgan. All right? But I love me some Colby Covington.
I do too.
Right? And I know it is, right?
I do too.
I don't agree. I could care less what Jorge Masvidal does against Gilbert Burns. He doesn't get a title shot. He can't come off of 4 straight losses and get one and get a title shot. You just can't.
But just for the storyline, right?
I understand the storyline, but
you're the pro wrestling guy. You're the pro wrestling guy.
I know. I love me some pro wrestling guy, right? But here's the deal: you think there's more deserving guys. Jorge Masvidal is not a more deserving guy to get a title shot. Now, if he can beat a Gilbert Burns, right? He's back in the talk. He's not even close to the talk right now, right? So that's a big if. But he's back to the talk of being in contention. The guy I feel, the worst for is Bilal Muhammad. What does this guy have to do? What does he have to do to get a title shot? And I don't know why he's not talked about more. I think he's starting to come into his own talking crap. And that's gonna be his route, because to your point, the UFC has analytics. They have people that study this. They have this. And if you're gonna say, I'm gonna get 300,000 UFC pay-per-views with a Muhammad, or I'm gonna get 800,000 with a Colby Covington, mic drop, game over. You got it. And Colby Covington is definitely deserving. He comes off of 2 razor close losses against Kamaru Usman. That in that second fight, it came down to the 5th. Both fights came down to the 5th and final round. In both fights, Kamaru Usman edged him out. Aside from maybe the first fight, I don't necessarily thought it should have been stopped, right? And you could make an argument that Colby Covington was winning that fight up until that point and could have won a decision victory. Got edges out in the 5th and final round against Kamaru Usman. And I think that Colby is a betting favorite going into a Leon Edwards fight. So I think Colby is definitely deserving of it. But Muhammad is as well. And what does he have to do? He's got to talk more crap. That's what he's got to do. I'm going to say it out loud. That's what he needs.
Yeah, and see, this is why I think too with Bilal is that, not only does he have the win streak, but he also has the history as well, right? I mean, he fought Leon Edwards, except that, the fight ended with an eye poke. And so it ended in a no contest. So they have history as well. And look, to your point, as far as Masvidal goes, I mean, Colby beat Masvidal. So if Masvidal beats Burns, Colby beat Masvidal, Colby is more deserving. So definitely in terms of who's more deserving, you're absolutely right. Colby's definitely more deserving than Masvidal. I feel like that storyline has to be completed. You know what I mean? Like,
listen, if Leon Edwards gets through Colby and Muhammad, no brainer. Masvidal could be on a 10-fight losing streak, and that fight sells.
And you still could, yeah, exactly. The fight still sells, right? You still got to complete that. So I'd love to see that happen. But yeah, Bilal Muhammad, man, I just feel like he's continuously kind of disrespected. And you're right. Maybe it's just because he is he's he's one of the nicest dudes you'll ever meet. He's funny online. He's created a fun persona. He's got a good Twitter personality, that sort of thing. But I guess maybe, yeah, because he doesn't talk trash, he doesn't get, the attention that he necessarily deserves. But to me, I don't know to me and again, because you touched on it, we're talking about business here, right? We're talking about pay-per-view sales and that sort of thing. I think if Masvidal beats Gilbert Burns, I go Masvidal for the next title shot just because the 3-piece Minnesota, and let's get that done. If he doesn't, I think you got to go Bilal. And how about this? How about this? How about the fact that they're not even saying, it's not, hey, Bilal, we're not giving you a title shot right now. It's, hey, Bilal, we're not giving you a title shot right now. And oh, by the way, have you seen this dude over here in this hat, Shavkat Rakhmonov? You see it? Yeah, the undefeated dude that finishes everybody. We think you'd like to match him up with you next. That's crazy to me. Like, we're not only not giving you a title shot,
that's not confirmed though, is it?
But in the press conference, Dana White looked over at Hunter Campbell and said, who are we working with right now? Who are we trying to match him up? And Hunter's like, oh, we're trying to do the Shavkat fight. They're trying to do Shavkat and Bilal right now. Like, bro, you don't only get the title shot, but also the undefeated dude that's finishing everybody. Yeah, we feel like that's a good matchup for you next. Like, what?
And here's why I hate that is because now we're I want a step for. I like to know who's in line, right? I would like to know that we have Colby followed by Muhammad, followed by whoever the next shall be, right? I mean, I hate knocking them out right away. Let's build. Yeah, I don't know. So, but agree and disagree on Colby Covington. The persona I tune in for. I'm one of those clicks. I'm a click. I'll take the bait, Colby. I'm clicking to see. What crap you're talking, man.
That's what sucks is that, dude, like, until, like, he came at me, and I still don't have any personal problems with, like, I actually am a Colby fan. Like, I love the fact that he was like, look, I'm kind of a wrestler at heart. My style isn't necessarily the most exciting. I'm not getting a lot of attention, a la Bilal Muhammad. So guess what? I'm just going to start talking mad junk until people pay attention to me. And he did it. He made it work for him. I like Colby Covington. Despite all our history, I like Colby Covington. It's just, in this particular situation, I guess I am saying there's some other options out there. By the way, if Bilal Muhammad goes back-to-back, 15-0 Sean Brady, 17-0 Shavkat Rakhmonov, and beats both those guys, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
He doesn't need to have it's hard to pronounce the name. He doesn't need to have that fight to get a title shot. That's not a title eliminator. For me, I do agree that Colby has the skills to get there, but he has talked himself into it. Dana White obviously loves Colby Covington. There's something there. And but I do agree with Dana, right? Colby came out to England. He made weight for this event. And there's not a lot of people that are going to do that. And he did it, probably got compensated pretty nicely for it, but he went and did it, but as probably a condition. There's a condition aside from a paycheck associated with. There's a condition. And that condition is if Leon Edwards wins, I get the next shot. Because did you see they had a camera focused on Colby Covington when that decision was read, and Colby went nuts. He forgot that he needed to talk crap at first. He started jumping up and down like a schoolboy because he knew in that moment, my shot's next. Then he turned it on. But that was pretty telling to me.
It was pretty cool, right? That's the natural reaction, right? Because if Usman wins, like, you're not getting that fight again. They're not going to give it to you right now. You've already had it twice. I mean, as great as the fights were, you just can't do it again. You can't keep going back to the well. But as soon as Leon got the decision, I did think that was a pretty telling reaction. He literally jumped up like a fan, just like, yeah, and then got back into character. But that was that one honest moment. So look, it's interesting. The thing, and Eric, you know me, man. You know me for a long time. The thing I hate about this situation is because I was interjected into the situation. Now, anytime I talk about it, it feels like it's coming from a personal standpoint, and it's not. It's absolutely not. And so I hate the fact that I've been kind of involved in this the way I have. But I will say this, man, there's a lot of options right now for Leon Edwards, man. The division is fresh. And this is, we just saw this recently, right? With like Alexa Grasso beating Valentina Shevchenko. I think dominant champions are good. I really do think it's nice in a division when you have a dominant champion because you really establish, greatness, and you establish a pecking order. And sometimes, like, you look at light heavyweight right now where the belt just keeps getting passed around like a hot potato. You don't really know who's, how good people are and how dominant they are. So I think dominant champions are good. But once you have a dominant champion, that moment that they get knocked off, boy, it just changes the landscape of the whole division because now matchups that didn't make sense before have new life. You start talking about things differently, and I think this is an exciting time for the welterweight division, which hasn't always been the case, right? I mean, the welterweight division is a division that has had a list of dominant champions from Matt Hughes to George St. Pierre to Kamaru Usman. Yeah, Tyron Woodley during his reign, you know what I mean? Where you had these dominant champions. Now, right now, it feels as fresh. The fact that we can sit here and have an argument about 3 different guys that all deserve a title shot right now and who should go first and what order should they go in, we haven't been able to do that at 170 pounds in a long time. So, it's upsetting, of course, for Usman, and you can't take away from what his accomplishments were, but it's exciting at 170 pounds right now.
Yeah, and don't know where he goes from here right now, but he probably is a minimum of 2 wins away, and hoping that that Leon Edwards loses in the next couple fights to get another shot, which is going to parlay me into quickly. Where does Justin Gaethje go from here? Does he have enough in him to get another run at the title? Is the UFC almost going to allow him to have another run at this title, or are we just going to make car crashes for him?
Well, he's going to make car crashes for himself. There's no question about that. But that is what's interesting about this, because I had the same thought coming out of this fight, right? We just talked about how amazing Justin Gaethje is, how exciting he is, how we know no matter what fight he's in that, he's going to be an exciting fight. And there's very few people in the UFC that, anytime their name is announced, I'm getting a fight of the night candidate. And he's one of those. But beyond that, he's also incredibly relevant in the lightweight title picture right now. So he's right there. I think you're going to make a big fight. He's talking about, hey, I'd like to fight Poirier again. I'd like to fight Oliveira again. Both of those fights do make a lot of sense, not only just from a storyline perspective, but also from a rankings perspective. And I think if he wins either one of those fights, you've got to talk about him being in the title picture. But I will say this. Don't try to step in front of my man, Beneil Dariush. I mean, Beneil Dariush, you got to give him his shot. You got to give him up next. But I honestly do believe if they make either Oliveira rematch or Poirier rematch, which both of those make sense, either one of those is a number 1 contender fight. Either one of those is a number 1 contender fight. It just has to be after Beneil Dariush.
This one's hard for me, kind of like the Colby Covington was, because I think it's hard to justify a guy who's had 2 different chances at the title in the last year and a half, get a third. But to your point, and to his point, I've proved that I should only fight guys in front of me now.
Yeah.
And you know what? He is so damn right on that. He has proven it. But the fan in me says, give me Michael Chandler again. Give me Dustin Poirier again. Or give me somebody that is going to bring everything they have to Justin Gaethje as well, and put it as the co-main event on any headliner you want ever.
100%. Look,
that's almost what I want as well. Selfishly.
There's a handful of guys that when a fight is announced, you don't care about, right? Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz, Conor McGregor. Those are guys that I don't care who they announce he's fighting. You don't go, well, does he deserve that? Does this really make sense ranking wise? You just go, oh, yeah, let's do that. And I think Gaethje has put himself in that mix where it's like, when you say Justin Gaethje is going to fight so-and-so, it doesn't matter. I don't need to ask you, well, does that make sense based on their win streak? Does that make sense based on their rankings? Does that make sense? And even as I was thinking about that, I mean, we got to see what happens first, of course, with Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. But how about a little Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor action in there, man? I mean,
oh my goodness. If Justin Gaethje either goes up to 70 or Conor can find a way to get back down to 55, well, it's not even red panty night for Justin Gaethje. It's red panty night for every MMA fan in the world to 100%. See that fight.
Make that fight. But I will say this. I think it's a hell of a lot more likely he goes up to 170 than the Conor McGregor comes down to 55. I saw Conor McGregor the other night. He is big right now. I don't think he's making 55 ever again. But yes, stylistically, I would love that fight, man. That's it. Justin Gaethje has got himself into that rarefied air. I would say, if they say, hey, Nate Diaz is fighting for a title, if they came to you next week, the UFC comes out, we got this crazy blockbuster for International Fight Week. Nick Diaz is fighting for a title. Does he deserve it? No. Are we all in for it? Yes. Of course we're in for it. And I think that's where Justin Gaethje is. We're like, you don't have to make sense of it. I mean, I don't know, man. Justin Gaethje is moving up to 85 and fighting Alex Pereira for the title. All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do that. I'm in.
Done.
I'm in. I'm in. Sure.
And you know what? I give him a shot.
I give him a shot. I give him
Oh,
a shot.
Good
That'd be the
Lord.
That'd be the craziest 90-second fight of all time, dude.
Yeah, and both guys are coming with mean hooks, and that's how I'm kind of surprised Justin never got that hook off like he really does, but he changed it to that jab uppercut. Man, it was vicious. I'm here for Justin Gaethje every single time he fights. Looking ahead, very short amount of time. I thought we were going to blow through this podcast. I'm like, they ain't going to fill an hour. We're 50 minutes in right now. Looking ahead, UFC on ESPN 43 from San Antonio, Texas. We won't go through the whole card, but the headliner is one that definitely needs to be talked about. Marlon Cheetah Vera versus Corey Sandhagen. I said this to you before we started recording. Marlon Vera does not start fast. He's a computer. He's downloading information. He eventually gets a spot and he picks it by reading his opponent. This is the opponent he has to start fast again. He has to get in there. He needs to show him who's boss and bully him from the moment, because if he doesn't, Corey Sandhagen is crafty, good enough that he can catch Marlon Vera.
100%. I love this fight. It's a big fight. Stylistically, it should be a lot of fun. I think those first 5 minutes, as you said, are going to be very telling, because Sandhagen does start fast. He does everything fast, and he could absolutely catch him early. Cheeto Vera has a tendency to kind of study, get to know your rhythm a little bit, and then make those attacks. He's a very, very smart,
and
very
did Sandhagen have
fighter.
a rhythm?
No, he doesn't. That's
right.
Why that's what's kind of interesting. Like, what are you studying? What are you trying to wait on? What are you trying to figure out? Because you're not going to see patterns. You're not going to find your opening. I mean, maybe you're just getting a feel for the speed. Maybe you're just getting a feel for some of what comes at you. But yeah, stylistically, man, this is a fun fight. I think you're right. On paper, I don't think this card is phenomenal top to bottom. It does. I mean, that's kind of what always happens. Like the week after a pay-per-view, you got a massive pay-per-view, you got massive matchups, you got titles, you got huge things. And then the next week feels like a step down. And I understand that's what it is. But this main event could be on any pay-per-view main card, could be anywhere. I mean, this is a world-class main event, and it's meaningful in the division. Now, how meaningful it is, I guess, kind of remains to be seen, right? Because, I mean, these are two of the top contenders at 135 pounds. For me right now, the top contender is Merab Dvalishvili. I mean, we talked about that amazing performance he had against Peter Yan. To me, he has established himself as the number one contender. We do know, of course, that we have Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo coming up in the title fight. Aljamain and Merab aren't going to fight each other. We think Aljamain, win or lose, might go to 45. There's a lot going on. So I think that kind of unfortunately hurts this fight a little bit, because it's not necessarily a true, pure number one contender fight. You don't necessarily know what the stakes are for the winner. It's a big fight. The winner needs to win to stay relevant in all that discussion, but you don't know exactly what's next. And I think a lot of times that's what excites us about fights, is not only, kind of the fight itself, but knowing what's at stake. We don't know exactly what's at stake here, but you know what? Clear the deck on that. Stylistically, it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, these are two incredible high-level mixed martial artists. Their styles match up fun, but I think you touched on it. Those first 5 minutes are going to be incredibly telling. I hope we get past those first 5 minutes, because I think the longer this thing goes, it could be an absolute technical masterpiece, an absolute war between two dudes that can bang. I think this is going to be a phenomenal fight, but early on, Cheeto has got to be very, very aware of what's coming at him in Corey Sandhagen.
And he's willing to stand in the fire to read, but if there's no fire to stand in because you don't know where the fire is coming from, I'm just worried. This is how a Cheeto Vera fight goes. Why won't he start fighting him? When is he going to start fighting him? When is he going to do something? Holy shit, he just knocked him out. What? Did you just see what he did to Dominic Cruz? Did you just see what he did to so-and-so? Like, oh my God, that guy is so good.
Well, and I think
the first round and a half, you're like, when is he going to start fighting him?
Yeah, and I think what's good is that this is a 5-round fight, right? So, I mean, he's got that cardio. I mean, this is a dude that, like, I mean, you follow this guy on social media. It's crazy. Like, yeah, hey, today's my day off, so I just ran 10 miles today. That's all I did because it was my day off. You're like, that's your day off? You went and ran 10 miles? Like, what? I mean, that's the kind of guy this is. He's a dedicated professional. Doesn't really, take time off. He's always in camp. So the longer this thing goes, it will be good for you. Not that Corey Sandhagen can't hang. That's what I'm saying. The longer this thing goes, I think the more intriguing and the more exciting it gets, because I think they're so well matched. But to your point, those first 5 minutes, those first 7.5 minutes, man, they're going to be dangerous for Chito Vera because of the way that these things happen. That Corey Sandhagen is always fast. He's always on the attack, and Chito likes to kind of download a little bit and see what's up. So I'm loving this. This is gonna be a good one. It's a San Antonio fight, man. Which my native Texas, I'm bummed a little bit that I won't be going home to Texas. San Antonio, phenomenal town.
Not going to be getting into your Whataburger.
I'm not going to get my Whataburger, you know what I'm saying? Instead, I'm going to be in Colombia. First time in Colombia for me. So I guess I'm not going to go to San Antonio. At least I can go to another country and soak that in. I'll take it.
Well, wrapping up here on another stacked. I even told you before we started recording, like, hey, I think we're going to be able to get this pretty quick. There's not a lot coming up in the next week or two.
And you know what? I wanted to laugh at you. I'm like, you think me and you could talk MMA and wrap it up quickly? Like, come on, bro. We could do like 5 hours if we wanted to.
We really could. I'm like, in my head, I'm still on round 2 of the Leon Edwards fight. I'm only there in my head if I really wanted to talk it all down. But man, this was really exciting. Thank you for everybody for watching. You can watch us on YouTube, listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast needs. Follow John Morgan on Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. We're gonna keep our fingers crossed, knock on wood, no travel issues. But if he's got them going to Colombia, you'll hear it first by following his Twitter. Again, I bring nothing useful and relevant to the Twitter world, but follow me out of pity. I would appreciate it. John, I guess you already said it. You're going to Colombia. You got anything else for us this week? Any hard-hitting things this week that we're going to be seeing on the underground or on your Twitter?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying a couple quick days at home, catching up with the family, and then back off again. This month is crazy, and then at the end of the month, it's back out to Philly for CFFC for back-to-back events. So this month is crazy, man, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Awesome. I'm bogged down with Grizzly games. I got a game Monday, Wednesday, Friday, fly to Atlanta, do a game in Atlanta, come back, and then 3 more games next week at home games next week as well. But we'll be back here next Monday to talk MMA with you. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.